The pandemic gold rush is over. The sales charts have collapsed. And instead of innovation, the American firearms industry brought something else to Houston in 2026. They brought ghosts, resurrected brand names from the 1960s, barrels sourced from overseas factories, trigger assemblies sealed shut with industrial glue so you cannot fix what they refuse to fix themselves. Somewhere out in the deer woods this fall, a hunter is going to pull the trigger on one of these rifles and hear the worst sound in the world. Not a bang, a click, a stuck bolt, a casing that will not come out. These are not budget rifles. These are liability transfers. 5 of them, exposed, no marketing language, no sponsored segments, just cold mechanical truth. These are the 5 worst deer rifles shown at the 2026 NRA annual meetings. And by the time this list is done, you will never look at a cheap price tag the same way again. Number 5. The Savage Axis. Generation 1. $350 to $400 at retail. Still on the shelves. Still being handed to first-time deer hunters by well-meaning fathers and underpaid sporting goods clerks. And still, after all these years, carrying the exact same mechanical sins it was born with. Here is what Savage will not put in the brochure. The trigger on the standard axis breaks at 5 pounds 15 ounces. Nearly 6 full pounds of force required to fire a rifle that itself weighs 6 pounds 5 ounces. Think about what that means. You are pulling with a force nearly equal to the entire weight of the weapon. Your index finger does not work in isolation. At that pressure threshold, every tendon in your hand sympathetically contracts. Your palm squeezes. Your wrist rotates. And in the 40 milliseconds before that firing pin strikes the primer, your crosshairs have already drifted off the vital zone of the animal. The physics do not lie. A 6-pound trigger on a 6-pound rifle is not a fire control group. It is a guarantee of poor shot placement, but the trigger is only the beginning. The ejection system on the axis is built around a plunger ejector seated in the bolt face. When the spring tension on that plunger runs weak from the factory, and it frequently does, the spent brass does not clear the receiver. It extracts from the chamber, travels 2 inches to the rear, loses momentum, and falls straight back down into the action. Now you have a dead trigger and a trapped case blocking the magazine feed. In the field, clearing that malfunction means dropping your magazine, locking the bolt back, and digging the brass out with your fingernail while your deer disappears into the tree line. Retail price, $350 to $400. The price of a clean harvest, it is not. Number 4. The Mossberg Patriot Predator SF, $536. SF stands for Suppressor Friendly. And on paper, the concept is exactly what the modern deer hunter asked for. A compact, lightweight bolt action, a threaded muzzle ready for a silencer, a rifle you can run through thick timber without hanging up on every branch. Mossberg heard the market. They just forgot to consult the laws of thermodynamics before they built the answer. Here is the mechanical reality they shipped to Houston. The barrel on the Patriot Predator SF is 16.25 inches long. To hit that length, Mossberg took a standard contour barrel and simply cut it shorter. No heavier bull profile. No longitudinal fluting to add rigidity and surface area. Just a thin-walled tube, chopped down and threaded at the end. And thin walls mean one thing in a hunting rifle chambered in .308 Winchester, a cartridge generating upward of 62,000 pounds per square inch of chamber pressure. They mean heat has nowhere to go. Your first shot out of a cold bore on this rifle will likely group inside 1 minute of angle. Clean. Convincing. It will make you trust it completely. Do not trust it. By the 4th round, the barrel has absorbed enough thermal energy that the residual stresses left over from budget-tier manufacturing begin to express themselves. The steel does not expand uniformly. It bends. it walks. Shot number 4 lands 2.5 inches from shot number 3. In a hunting scenario, that is the difference between a clean harvest and a wounded animal running 300 yards into a swamp. Now add a suppressor. 8 to 12 ounces bolted to the end of a 16-inch lightweight barrel shifts the center of gravity so far forward, the rifle feels like it is trying to dive into the ground during any offhand shot. And when you cycle the bolt for a follow-up round, the geometry of that compact synthetic stock drives the bolt handle directly into your nose. A rifle that physically strikes the shooter during the manual of arms is not a suppressor-friendly hunting tool. It is a design failure with a threaded muzzle. Retail price? $500 to $36. And a bag of frozen peas for your face. Number 3. The Ruger Harrier. $699 to $749. A direct impingement AR platform rifle marketed aggressively at both the home defender and the deer hunter. Ruger called it the future of their modern sporting rifle lineup. They discontinued 2 beloved platforms to make room for it on the shelves. And right here, before we tear this rifle apart bolt carrier by bolt carrier, I have a question for you. The Ruger Harrier was built to replace 2 legendary Ruger AR lines that came before it. Name just one of them. Is it A, the AR-556, B, the Mini 14, or C, the PC Carbine? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I will give you the answer at the end of this video. Think fast. All right. Now, let us talk about why Ruger should have kept those rifles instead. In 2025, Sturm Ruger and Company acquired the manufacturing facilities of Anderson Manufacturing in Hebron, Kentucky. Anderson has been known for 1 decade inside the firearms community for exactly one thing: bottom-tier quality control, out-of-spec receivers, brittle finishes, dimensional tolerances treated as suggestions rather than engineering requirements. Ruger did not fix Anderson. Ruger became Anderson. Here is what that looks like in mechanical terms. The barrel extension on the Harrier, the critical component that interfaces the barrel to the upper receiver and aligns the feed ramps, is arriving from the factory clocked. That is a gunsmithing term, meaning the barrel has been installed slightly rotated off its true vertical axis. When the bolt carrier group attempts to strip a round from the magazine and drive it forward into the chamber, it is pushing that cartridge into feed ramps that no longer line up with the cuts in the aluminum receiver. The brass gets crushed. The round jams. Your follow-up shot on a running deer does not happen. Correcting a clocked barrel requires completely disassembling the upper receiver. But the factory over-torqued the barrel nut without a reaction rod, which means the indexing pins are sheared, and the receiver itself may be warped by the time you get the barrel nut to break loose. And it gets worse. The gas port drilled into the top of the white 16.1-inch nitride barrel is too large. In a direct impingement system, the pressure equation is simple. Force equals pressure multiplied by area. A larger port means a steeper pressure curve. The bolt unlocks while chamber pressure is still dangerously elevated. Primers blow, extractor rims tear. The bolt carrier slams rearward with so much kinetic violence that even an H3 buffer and an extra power buffer spring cannot fully absorb the impulse. Every shot feels like the rifle is trying to escape your hands. Your sight picture is gone before the bullet clears the muzzle. And after 250 rounds, the A2 flash hider on the muzzle will be spinning freely by hand, because the assembly line never properly set the crush washer or applied the 15 to 20 foot-pounds of torque that military specification requires. $699 to $749 for a rifle that shakes itself apart and punishes you for pulling the trigger. Number 2. The Stevens 334, $389 in synthetic stock, $489 with Turkish walnut. Savage Arms resurrected the Stevens brand name for one reason and one reason only: to sell a rifle at a price point they could not hit with domestic labor and domestic quality control. So they outsourced the entire manufacturing operation to ATA Arms in Turkey and shipped the result to Houston with a straight face. The first thing you notice when you pick up a Stevens 334 is the weight, 7.42 to 7.5 pounds before you mount a single piece of glass. Add a standard 3 to 9 power 40mm hunting optic, steel rings, a bipod, and a sling, and you are carrying 9.5 pounds through elevation changes and rugged terrain all morning. For a rifle chambered in short-action cartridges like .243 Winchester and 6.5 Creedmoor, cartridges specifically chosen by hunters who want a lightweight, low-recoil system, that weight is an inexcusable engineering contradiction. The receiver block was designed for long-action Magnum cartridges. They just never bothered to scale it down. But the weight will not be the thing that breaks you. The trigger will. The factory trigger on the Stevens 334 requires between 5.0 and 7.5 pounds of force to break the sear. At the upper end of that range, you are pulling with a force equal to the entire unloaded weight of the rifle. We already explained what that does to your hand geometry in number 5. Here it is again, compounded by the fact that this trigger has no path to redemption, because Savage and ATA Arms sealed the adjustment screws shut. The trigger assembly appears to feature standard hex head set screws for adjusting pull weight and sear engagement. They are there, you can see them, but underneath those screw heads, the factory has applied industrial-grade Loctite thread locker and packed the cavities with heavy wax. When you attempt to turn those screws with a standard hex key, the chemical bond transfers the rotational stress directly to the screw head itself. The head strips. The screw is now destroyed. The trigger is now permanently frozen at 7.5 pounds and also permanently unserviceable. Savage did not forget to make this trigger adjustable. They deliberately chose to prevent you from adjusting it. The mandatory fix is a $140 aftermarket drop-in trigger assembly from Timney or Jard. You must buy it before this rifle is safe to hunt with, which means your $389 budget rifle now costs $529 before you purchase a single box of ammunition or a single optic. But even that does not solve everything. The barrel is threaded into the receiver using industrial green Loctite, specifically 620 or 640 series anaerobic retaining compound. This is a chemical adhesive engineered for permanent bearing retention in industrial machinery. Breaking that bond requires heating the steel past 500 degrees Fahrenheit to reach the glass transition phase of the polymer chains. Rebarreling a Stevens 334 or correcting its headspace means 4-foot cheater bars, industrial blowtorches, heavy-duty barrel vices, and frequently 2 technicians applying simultaneous force to avoid warping the action. Locking a hunting rifle barrel into a receiver with permanent industrial adhesive is not a manufacturing shortcut. It is a declaration that this rifle is disposable. Once the throat erodes and the micro-groove rifling begins to foul beyond recovery, and it will, there is no path to restoration. The investment is a total loss. The rifle goes in a dumpster. $389 to $489, plus $140 for the trigger you were always going to need, plus $250 in gunsmithing fees if you ever try to touch the barrel, plus the cost of a better rifle you should have bought in the first place. Number 1. The Ruger Glenfield Model A, $499. And the single most dishonest product Sturm Ruger and Company has put its name on in the modern era. To understand why this rifle exists, you need to understand what the Glenfield name actually means. Marlin Firearms created the Glenfield division in the 1960s for one specific purpose: to sell stripped-down, cost-reduced firearms through Sears Roebuck and J.C. Penney catalog pages to consumers who did not know enough to ask better questions. Glenfield was never a mark of quality, it was a mark of margin. A brand built on the assumption that the buyer would not notice what was missing until it was too late. When Ruger acquired Marlin's assets in 2020, that brand name came with the deal. And in 2026, with sales collapsing and boardrooms panicking, Ruger reached into that drawer, pulled out a 60-year-old marketing strategy, and pointed it directly at the American deer hunter. The Glenfield Model A is a cost-reduced Generation 1 Ruger American. Same aging action architecture, same basic bones, but with the manufacturing frills removed to price it $100 below the standard Ruger American Generation 1. Injection molded synthetic stock in moss green. No spiral barrel fluting. No meaningful quality control on the chamber reaming. And a 3-lug bolt with a 70-degree rotational throw that contains a fundamental mechanical flaw Ruger chose not to correct before putting this rifle into production. Let us start with the bolt. A 70-degree bolt throw sounds like a feature. Less arc of travel means less chance of the bolt handle contacting your optic during cycling. But mechanical advantage is governed by geometry, and geometry does not negotiate. When you lift that bolt handle to extract a spent casing, the camming surface at the root of the bolt handle engages the rear receiver bridge and physically pries the expanded brass rearward by a fraction of an inch, breaking the hydrodynamic friction seal between the case and the chamber wall. That camming action is primary extraction. It is the mechanical foundation that every bolt-action rifle depends on. The camming geometry on the Glenfield Model A is insufficient for the task. Compound that with chamber walls left rough from inadequate reaming, walls covered in microscopic machining grooves that the expanding brass aggressively molds into under 62,000 pounds per square inch of firing pressure, and you have a rifle that is physically sealing itself shut every time you pull the trigger. Field reports from early 2026 are consistent and damning. Shooters describe bolt lift so stiff that they must completely break their firing position, lower the rifle from the shoulder, grip the bolt handle with both hands, and physically beat it upward to open the action. This is not an ammunition sensitivity issue. This failure is documented across premium factory hunting loads from Hornady and Federal alike. This is a chamber and camming geometry defect shipped from the factory as standard configuration. And the internal machining does not stop punishing you there. The channels and raceways cut into the bolt body are left with razor-sharp, unfinished metallic edges. Documented, photographed, posted across hunting forums throughout the first quarter of 2026. Users removing the bolt for routine field cleaning are cutting their fingers on the metal inside their own rifle. Now, let us talk about what this rifle does to a deer at 300 yards. Baseline accuracy testing with match grade and premium hunting ammunition yields 3.5 to 4.0 minutes of angle at 100 yards under controlled conditions. Best case scenario, on the best day, with the most consistent ammunition available, this rifle prints 2.0 to 2.5 minutes of angle. The ethical kill zone on an adult whitetail deer is 6 to 8 inches in diameter. At 300 yards, a 4-minute of angle rifle scatters its shots inside a 12-inch circle under perfect vacuum conditions. Add wind deflection. Add the biological tremor of a hunter managing adrenaline in the field. That circle grows. It grows past the vital zone. And the animal runs. But it gets worse the moment you thread a suppressor onto that 5/8 by 24 muzzle. The added mass of a sound suppressor, 8 to 16 ounces, hanging off the terminal end of an already thin barrel contour, changes the harmonic signature of the barrel whip during the internal ballistic phase. The sine wave the barrel traces during the projectile's transit down the bore shifts in frequency and amplitude. The hollow injection molded synthetic stock provides zero structural dampening. The free-floated barrel has no rigidity to resist the new harmonic pattern imposed by the suppressor's mass. The result is 4.5 minutes. Before we close this out, let us settle that pop quiz. Back at number 3, I asked you which legendary Ruger AR platform the Harrier was built to replace. The answer is A, the AR-556. One of the most reliable, most trusted entry-level modern sporting rifles ever to carry the Ruger name. Discontinued. Replaced by a rifle assembled on Anderson manufacturing tooling that cannot keep its flash hider threaded on past 250 rounds. If you got it right, drop a 1 in the comments. If you got it wrong, that is fine. Now you know. And knowing is the only thing standing between you and a $400 mistake in the sporting goods aisle. Here is what 2026 actually told us. The American firearms industry is not in a slump because hunters stopped hunting. It is in a slump because the industry spent 3 years during the pandemic selling anything it could stamp a caliber on to anyone who would buy it. And now, when the market corrected, instead of building better rifles, they built cheaper ones and dressed them in legacy brand names they pulled out of storage like old Halloween costumes. Glenfield, Stevens, Harrier. Names designed to trigger nostalgia and bypass critical thinking. The 5 rifles on this list share one common engineering philosophy. Transfer the cost of the manufacturer's decisions onto the hunter. Seal the trigger so you cannot fix it. Lock the barrel so you cannot rebarrel it. Ship a clocked barrel extension and let the gunsmith sort it out. Build a thin barrel on a suppressor-friendly rifle and let the deer absorb the thermal drift. An ethical hunter owes the animal a clean, precise, and immediate harvest. That is not a sentiment. That is a standard. And none of these 5 rifles meet it out of the box at any price point. If this video saved you $400 or saved a deer from a bad shot, then do one thing. Hit that subscribe button. Not because some algorithm told you to, not because I asked you nicely, but because next season, when the next wave of budget rifles rolls out with new names and the same old sins, you're going to want to know before you pull the trigger. We will be here.